Gone a 8:15, OTB AM. You're very welcome along. It's Adrian and Shane with you until 10 this morning. Plenty to get to. Do keep those comments coming in. Some live wires on the comment line this morning. We'll come back to those over the course of today. Alan Quinlan, good morning to you.
Morning, lads. How are you?
I am okay. A bit sort of apprehensive about the weekend ahead, but you popped your head around the corner about an hour ago now at this stage, pre-show, just to settle everybody's nerves and say, listen, it's all right. Everything's going to be okay. I kind of feel like there's been so much chat about it, been written in the stars, that it has to be Leinster La Rochelle in the final, that there are two major hurdles for both of those to cross, that nothing is a given this weekend.
No, nothing is a given, particularly when you play against a side like Toulouse. Leinster and Toulouse have played in 4 semi-finals, and Leinster have won 3 of them. So 3 of those were in the Aviva. One was in Toulouse in 2010. And I think based on what we saw in the pool stages, Leinster have played better rugby. You know, they dismantled Racing in that first game back in December, if you can remember that. They were outstanding. Gloucester brought a second string team for round 2, 57-0 in that one. Then Leinster went to Gloucester and they had a full team and again scored 49 points. So they were brilliant in the pool stages, and then beat Racing, beat them 36-10 in Dublin. So in the pool stages, Leinster were brilliant. Stuttered a little bit against Ulster. Conditions were really poor, but demolished Leicester then in that quarter-final there a couple of weeks ago as well. So they're a side that are just very, very difficult to stop when they're on song. People keep going back to last year's final and the Bulls game in the semi-final of the URC as well, and maybe the previous year when La Rochelle beat them, and there's a bit of a template there to stop Leinster, but it's very difficult. I think they will have learned a lot. Their pace, their accuracy, the lines of running, all that kind of stuff are just sublime, so everybody knows their role inside out. And then you look at Toulouse in the pool stages. You know, in round 1 they beat Munster in Thomond Park. Then they beat Sale pretty convincingly home and away. In fairness, that was impressive. Strong physical Sale side who can disrupt you. And you look at round 4, Munster could have beaten them in Toulouse. So I think on form you'd probably look and say that Leinster are in a better place. But I think the last 30 minutes probably against the Sharks in the quarter-final, some of the tries they scored, the offloading, the pace, and we know they have those X-factor players. So if you put the players down on paper and kind of match them off against each other, it's 50-50.
Yeah, pretty even.
It is, because half and half really. If you were to select 15, there'd be half Toulouse, half Leinster. On
that, right, I was sort of thinking as you were chatting there about players knowing their roles and the experience of being there and all that stuff. But then you take obviously James Lowe's out of the mix. Johnny Sexton's not in the team. I see this morning that Robbie Henshaw's out, and particularly when you look at the threat of a player like Dupont, who we have to come to, and watching him a couple of weeks ago for Toulouse, where he plays the vast majority of the game at 12 and looks as if he's been playing 12 all his life. Suddenly there's an argument starts to stack up for Toulouse.
Possibly, yeah. I think if Robbie Henshaw was out at this stage, he'd be a big loss because he's such a great presence on the field. He's so physical
and right on that Dupont channel as well.
Yeah, he is, and you'd imagine he'll protect Ross Byrne a lot as well. Not that Ross Byrne is a weak tackler or anything, but I just think his presence there, and obviously takes a little bit pressure off Gary Ringrose, whose form has been outstanding. James Lowe's kicking game is the loss, I suppose. Look, he's a wonderful player as well, James Lowe. He's improved his game so much, and top-class international who's a big game player. Jordan Larmour coming in there is an incredible runner. So, if Henshaw didn't play, maybe Frawley will play and Charlie Ngatai. So they have depth across the board there. And they've known Johnny Sexton has been out for a while, and wouldn't be available for this. So they're a side that don't panic. I think it's up front where this game will kind of be won and lost, really, I think, as regards, because Leinster, I think they can still win off scraps. Toulouse have a side that are very physically imposing. Their front 5 are very powerful and strong. Mafu, the second row, does a lot of damage at the breakdown, but and people talking about that game last year a lot, which is very relevant, I suppose, because the psychological damage that may have done to Toulouse. Leinster just blew them away last year, and there's a bit of focus, I suppose, on Toulouse having to play the week before, travel to Dublin, the penalties, the extra time. Munster kind of gave it everything, and it was a very physical game, and that they weren't, they were dead in their legs a little bit for that Leinster
Different
game.
dynamic this week.
It is, yeah. They rested all their players. They went to Stade Francais last weekend, and Toulouse rested. And it's interesting listening to Hugo Mola and reading some of the comments he made, that they've been trawling back over, some of those Leinster games where they lost the Bulls last year, the La Rochelle final, the La Rochelle semi-final, a couple of France-Ireland games, and trying to find any sort of vulnerability or weakness, which is difficult. The most obvious one is if you slow Leinster down and get really physical with them, that you can hurt them there. But it's hard to do that. It's easier said than done. It's a bit probably what you're going to ask me. How do you stop Anton Dupont? How do you stop Leinster?
Question, right? It's such a...
Because Leinster are physical themselves, they're abrasive.
What do you do with them? Because, as trite as the question is, if you're Stuart Lancaster and Leo Cullen and Andrew Goodman sitting down this week, they have to answer it. You
can't. It's not about stopping him. It's about and that's
how
the
do you
point.
do that?
You make sure that both sides of the breakdown are locked and loaded. That players fold around if they hit up midfield, or keep going the same way. That there's enough players on the blind side to keep an eye on him, because if he sees anyone switching off, he'll go. And if you give him a one-on-one with someone with a little bit of space, he's such a stepper and he can get his hands through.
You have to make that first tackle, don't you?
And if you played with Anton Dupont, you think, if I track him, because if he gets the ball, he's going to do something crazy. He's going to spin around, he's going to get his hands through, he's going to sidestep someone. You line him up then to try and put in a big tackle on him, and he can just bounce away from you. So he's a very powerful guy for a small frame.
Yeah.
He's chunky but he's not.
Like a barrel.
Yeah, he is, and he's so powerful and elusive. So you just have to be careful with him. He runs those upfield lines then if the ball goes wide, and if someone makes a break, he's there in the inside line for passes. So scores a lot of tries. He got a wonderful try at the start of the game last year, didn't he, for Toulouse? And you thought that was going to give him a bit of a kickstart, but Leinster just responded, turned the pressure on, and were outstanding. So, they'll be very conscious and aware of him. And if you get a chance to get hold of him and kind of lift him backwards or
hold on a little bit after the tackle,
get him onto the ground and stuff like that. So he makes them flow and fire. What a wonderful player. He's the best rugby player in the world, because it's his all-round game. It isn't about, he's just a real good attacker. He's an incredible defender. He shoots out a line, he makes tackles, he stops the opposition, kicks with both legs. He could be a ruck in the middle of the field, and he could be aiming to go one way, he spins back, goes off the left peg. So he's a brilliant player.
How important is that early start for Toulouse then? If you're trying to beat Leinster, even Rogers writing about it in the Examiner this morning, when it all goes pear-shaped in the first 10 minutes, and any team that beats Leinster historically, you have to score 3 or 4 tries at least.
The problem with focusing on a good early start is if it doesn't happen, it has a double effect on you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you've just got to be calm and controlled, and particularly when you're away from home in a big game like this, I think they've got to make sure that Leinster... Well, if I was Toulouse, I'd be saying, look, no matter what happens and what results we've seen over the last number of years, Toulouse will still believe that individually they're as good, if not better, than some Leinster players, most of them, because they have that swagger about them. And I think the same will be said for Leinster stopping Toulouse. If Toulouse get in their flow, sometimes you're just running at shadows. They're incredible. The tries they scored there in that Sharks game in the quarter-final, it was very, very even, and the Sharks got some brilliant tries, but then Toulouse just do some crazy stuff and can score brilliant tries. So I think it's important, and it's a very obvious one, Shane, that Toulouse, if Leinster start racking up the scores, they're a very hard team to peg back. So yeah, I think I'd be saying to them, look, we have to start well, but if we don't, let's not panic. If we concede a try or two or we're 10 points down, don't throw some crazy pass that gives an intercept to one of the Leinster players and you're 17-0 down, then it's you know, the crowd get behind them and all that. So I don't know, on paper you think this should be a great game because they're two very attack-minded sides, but sometimes they negate each other. I think it'll be an arm wrestle and it'll be physical. There'll be a bit of bite to it. And I think Leinster have spoken all week, all their players and all their coaches, so they've obviously really discussed this, that Toulouse are going to be firing for this, and really they've had good preparation themselves. You know, Leinster didn't bring their frontliners to South Africa. Their coaches come home early. They've had nice little rest for them, and Toulouse have probably done the same. So they'll be fresh as daisies, both sides, and incredibly powerful sides. Just look at the front rows going at it. Talk to us about that bit about, like, so both of them obviously like to keep the ball alive, and both of them have the ability to do that in terms of quick transition around the breakdown and stuff like that. I was watching a sequence last night, I mentioned it a bit earlier on, with Francois Cross, the France back row. Was some clips against Scotland particularly, and he was such a menace. That ability to snag the ball, to snag a player, to slow everything down. How does all that manifest itself when you have two teams who are so eager and able to keep the ball alive, and then you have the likes of him, and you look at the Leinster back row, their ability to do the same thing? Is that sort of where it's won and lost with the back rows, or what's your... Well, it's more than the back rows in the modern game. About, you know, traditionally you think back rows get poaches, they hold people up, but everybody is doing the poaching game now. You know, you've wingers who are excellent at it, centres, full-backs, counter-rucking. So they're all being coached that way, and it's an important part of the game. It's about getting opportunities and being disciplined as well. You know, Wayne Barnes is refereeing this game, and he's going to be, let's hope he's not a central figure in the game, but I think slowing each other down, Leinster will try and do that with Toulouse. You know, they've an incredibly powerful side. Hold them on for that extra second. Yeah, it is, and it's just, I think anytime I ever played, and it probably doesn't change, if you play against Toulouse, is to try and keep them off the ground, actually, because if they right, you know, holding them up for a second or two and trying to tag the ball and stuff, because their offloading game, it's just part of their DNA. And they kick a lot as well, so it's similar to France. The kick tennis kind of game is about patience as well. So it may be a pragmatic approach. In a sense, Toulouse won't. You want to trying to get territory and trying to get into that Leinster half, because they will back their maul and their scrum, and they'll try and go after Leinster there. But you know, it's very small margins, Adrian, because Leinster, you know, very, very abrasive, aggressive, physical side as well. But you look at the size of Mafu and Richie Arnold, the second row, their back row, Jack Willis. They played Flamont in the back row last year. He's the French second row during the Six Nations, and Francois Cross. So that's a very, very big back five. You have Marchand in the front row, Aldegheri. Very, very powerful side and big. Is it a bit facetious to point to the home advantage in the Aviva Stadium as a serious influence in this game? Because, as you say, Toulouse kick a lot. It's a huge influence. It's a huge influence, and it's very, you know, I think it's hugely beneficial for Leinster. I think they played down probably a little bit of that, the home advantage. Talking about Toulouse winning 5 times and Leinster 4, and they're the best team. That's all true, but in recent times, Leinster have been the team. They've been the best side, probably most consistent side in Europe as regards performances. La Rochelle got them last year in that final, but if you go back over last year's competition and this year's competition, Leinster are the standout team for tries scored, for line breaks, for victories. You know, they came unstuck in that final. It was a brilliant second half from La Rochelle. If you go back to that final, you think that Leinster were in control in that second half, and some mistakes they made, and obviously La Rochelle, you've got to give them massive credit for that, but this is Leinster's to lose, really. It's a tricky one because, you know, they've got to be on it as well, because I think Toulouse will be better tomorrow, and I think, you know, it's very obvious from Mola the way he's talking about they've put so much work and effort in here to find any little chinks in the armour. So if he gets his team right, they're a very dangerous proposition. This isn't a foregone conclusion that Leinster will win this. I do think Leinster will win it, but I think Toulouse, if they're in the game and Leinster can't shake them off, they shook him off last year, and they have done in previous games. In 2019 they beat him 30 points to 12, pretty dominant for the whole game. 2011, that's back a good bit. Very much in control, even though they only won by 9 points in that game, 32-23. So it's the psychological thing. If they can shake Toulouse off, they could kick on and win it comfortably. If Toulouse are still in this game in 60th, 70th minute, that will be an indication that they're getting a lot right. Yeah. Leinster are a brilliant side, and they're so balanced, and their control, their accuracy around their passing and all that kind of stuff. So it'll be a really interesting one, but it's a good Toulouse side, and I think it's really intriguing to see, can they cope with the crowd and get a flow to their own game. Because if they get enough of control, even Intimac, Peter Aki's a great stepper in the centre, Malia Cruz in the wing, Ramos has been brilliant. So when you start naming the players, they're incredible. There's going to be a lot of 30 brilliant players out in that field tomorrow.
Who are you expecting to come through on the other side?
Well, you would imagine that La Rochelle will be too powerful for Exeter. I think the game against Gloucester in the quarterfinals, or in the round 16 game, they probably could have and should have lost that game. And I'm sure Rog would admit that himself. They were poor, Gloucester were brilliant. La Rochelle were back to themselves a little bit against Saracens in the quarterfinal. Incredibly powerful. They played to their strengths and were comfortable winners in the end. You would think. Saracens did come back at them. So Exeter have been a bit of a surprise package in Europe. Not that consistent in the Gallagher Premiership, and you would think on paper, would it been at home, the atmosphere in Bordeaux will be incredible as well. It's not that far away. You go on holidays there. It's only a couple of hours to Bordeaux, so I'm sure there'll be plenty of Exeter fans as well. So I think La Rochelle will probably come through that. So we probably will get the final that everyone was predicting.
We've come full circle now to say the thing that I'm not sure is going to happen.
It wouldn't be great for Dublin if it was La Rochelle Toulouse final, would it?
No,
so
it'd be amazing if it was all to be missing.
But I think it's Leinster's to lose, really. And
just very briefly, because we're bang out of time, Cian Tracy was writing in the Irish Independent this morning that Andrew Goodman is going to stay at Leinster, so that he obviously wasn't named to the All Blacks coaching staff.
The Crusaders were trying to get him back.
Were in touch with him, but suddenly this coaching ticket gone from a position where they're losing one of the most highly rated coaches in the world to now. I mean, is there a coaching ticket in the world that can compete with it?
Well, it's at a different level. Yeah, it is a different level. To lose someone like Stuart Lancaster and get Jack Nienenbauer
and keep Goodman,
unbelievable. Goodman as well. Yeah. So, and you can see then that when you have those quality coaches, I think a lot of the noise coming out of Leinster in the last few weeks about the budgets and all that stuff is down to coaching. It's not down entirely to coaching. They have a really good budget and player salaries, and that's down to their success with all the internationals they have and the way contracts are topped up from the RFU. So, but the coaching as well is unbelievable, and you can see that. You can see players, just their detail is through the roof, and they're an incredibly accurate side. So to have Goodman there again, it's a statement of intent. Why wouldn't you want to? I think he's going to develop more and more there. And when you're at probably the top side in Europe, you're going to get a lot of kudos out of that as well. And we probably experienced that in Munster back in the day, where you've a certain amount of coaches there, and they go on and they get. When you're winning or you're knocking on the door in Europe, it enhances your reputation. Yeah. So if Leinster are winning a Champions Cup this year or URC, his CV is going through the roof. And I think he's still young. He's only 40, isn't he? Yeah. So there'll be more opportunities to go back home as well. So it's not surprising, but it's great that he's kind of staying put and not going back to New Zealand for Leinster.
Enjoy the games.
Will do,
Talk to you next week.
Very good.
Bit of positivity there for Leinster fans. We'll take that at 8:36.